At my wife's birthday dinner, the screen displayed impotent, failure, high school dropout, low income, now single. Laughter erupted. My wife grinned. Don't laugh too much. He might cry. My wife's mother sipped her wine. Her father chuckled. Just a joke, right? I took out my phone. Begin. The room went silent. You know that feeling when you're sitting in a room full of people, but you might as well be invisible? That's been my life for the past 5 years. My name is Marcus Grant, and if you saw me walking down the street in Brooklyn, you'd probably forget my face before I even turned the corner. Average height, average build, average everything. Or at least that's what everyone thinks. I work as a general office administrator at a mid-sized accounting firm in downtown Brooklyn. Nothing glamorous about it. I push papers, schedule meetings, make sure the coffee machine's stocked, and keep the office running smooth. Most days, I'm the guy people walk past without a second glance. The invisible man in the khakis and button-down shirt who shows up at 9, eats lunch at his desk, and heads home by 6. My coworkers are decent enough. They'll say morning when they grab their coffee, maybe ask about my weekend if we're stuck in the elevator together. But I'm not the guy they invite out for drinks after work. I'm not the one they're gossiping with by the water cooler. I'm just Marcus. Reliable, quiet Marcus who never causes any drama and always gets his work done on time. That's exactly how my wife Celia sees me too. Actually, scratch that. She doesn't really see me at all. To her, I'm like that piece of furniture you keep meaning to replace, but just haven't gotten around to yet. Functional, but nothing you'd brag about to your friends. I'm the guy who picks up her dry cleaning, remembers to pay the bills, and never complains when she changes our dinner plans last minute because something better came up. We met 6 years ago at a coffee shop in Park Slope. She was arguing with the barista about her latte, something about the foam not being right, and I stepped in to smooth things over. Paid for her drink, made a little joke that actually got her to smile. She was gorgeous, way out of my league, and I couldn't believe it when she gave me her number. Looking back now, I wonder if she was just impressed that someone was willing to clean up her messes without expecting anything in return. The first year was good, really good. She made me feel like I mattered, like I was worth something. But somewhere along the way, that changed. Maybe it happened gradually, or maybe I was just too blind to see it coming. She started making these little comments. Nothing too harsh, just enough to sting. Oh, Marcus is fine with whatever we decide. Don't worry about Marcus. He's not really into that kind of thing. Marcus is more of a practical choice. Her parents made it crystal clear from day one that I wasn't what they had in mind for their precious daughter. Warren Montgomery. Yeah, that's her maiden name. Montgomery is some hotshot investment banker who probably makes more in a month than I do in 3 years. Drives a BMW, wears suits that cost more than my rent, and has this way of looking at me like I'm something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. Lorraine, Celia's mom, is even worse. She's got that fake sweet smile down to an art form, the kind that says, bless your heart, but really means, you poor, pathetic thing. She'll ask about my little job and nod along like she's interested, but I can see it in her eyes. I'm temporary. A placeholder until Celia comes to her senses and finds someone more suitable. The worst part? They don't even try to hide it anymore. During family dinners, they'll talk about Celia's future like I'm not even sitting right there. When you finally settle down with the right person, once you're ready for a real relationship, they've got this whole fantasy mapped out where I just disappear one day, and Celia magically ends up with some lawyer or doctor who went to the right schools and belongs to the right country club. And Celia? She just sits there and lets it happen. Never stands up for me. Never tells them to back off. Sometimes I catch her nodding along, like she's already mentally planning her exit strategy. Like I'm just this inconvenient chapter she has to get through before her real life begins. I've tried talking to her about it. Tried explaining how it feels to be treated like I don't matter, like I'm just killing time until someone better comes along. But she always brushes it off. They don't mean anything by it, Marcus. You're being too sensitive. That's just how my family is. So I learned to keep my mouth shut. Smile and nod during family gatherings. Laugh along when her friends make jokes about us being such an unlikely couple. Pretend it doesn't bother me when she introduces me as just my husband Marcus, like I'm some afterthought she picked up at the grocery store. But here's the thing about being invisible. People forget you're listening. They forget you're paying attention. They get comfortable saying things they probably shouldn't, doing things they think no one will notice. And after 5 years of being treated like furniture, I've heard and seen a lot. You want to know what really gets me? It's not even the disrespect anymore. I've gotten used to that. It's the assumption that I'm too weak, too stupid, or too pathetic to do anything about it. Like I'm just going to sit here forever, taking whatever scraps of affection they throw my way, grateful for the privilege of being tolerated. They think they know me. They think they've got me all figured out. But there's a lot they don't know about quiet, unremarkable Marcus Grant. And pretty soon, they're going to find out just how wrong they've been. Celia's 30th birthday is coming up, and her parents are throwing her this huge party. All the important people will be there, her colleagues, her friends, her family's social circle. Everyone who matters. Everyone except me, apparently. I'm just expected to show up, smile pretty, and try not to embarrass anyone. But I've got other plans for that night. Plans they'd never see coming in a million years. Because sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you should worry about most. 3 weeks before Celia's 30th birthday, Warren cornered me in our kitchen during one of their family planning sessions. I was making coffee, because apparently that's what I do now, serve drinks while they decide how to spend money I'll never see, when he dropped the news. We're thinking the Sky Terrace at the Mandarin Oriental, he said, not even looking up from his phone. Lorraine's already talked to the event coordinator. It'll be perfect for what we have in mind. The Sky Terrace. I'd looked that place up once, just out of curiosity. $3,000 just to reserve the space, and that's before you even think about food, drinks, or decorations. Meanwhile, I'm clipping coupons and buying generic cereal. But hey, nothing's too good for Princess Celia's milestone birthday. Sounds expensive, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Warren finally looked at me, and I could practically see the dollar signs calculating behind his eyes. Don't worry about it, son, he said. And God, I hate when he calls me that. This is an investment in Celia's future. She deserves to be surrounded by the right kind of people on her special day. The right kind of people. Translation, not me. For the next 2 weeks, I watched them plan this thing like they were organizing a political campaign. Lorraine had spreadsheets, actual spreadsheets, with guest lists categorized by importance. There were the A-listers, city council members, successful entrepreneurs, old family friends with connections. Then the B-list, Celia's college friends who'd made something of themselves, co-workers from her marketing firm, distant relatives with money. I didn't even make the C-list. I was just Marcus, husband, with a question mark next to it, like they weren't sure I'd actually show up to my own wife's birthday party. The guest list kept growing. 200 people, then 250, then 300. I recognized maybe 30 names, and half of those were people who'd never bothered to learn mine. But Celia was in her element, calling everyone personally, posting teaser photos on Instagram, acting like this was going to be the social event of the century. You know what would be perfect? Lorraine said during one of their planning sessions. If Marcus wore navy instead of black. We don't want anyone mistaking him for the waitstaff. I was sitting right there in my own living room, and she's talking about me like I'm not even present. Celia just nodded along, already scrolling through her phone to find the perfect navy suit for her husband to wear so he wouldn't embarrass her family. Navy it is, I said, forcing a smile. Wouldn't want to cause any confusion. The suit shopping trip was its own special kind of hell. Celia dragged me to 3 different stores in Manhattan, each one more expensive than the last. She kept rejecting perfectly good suits because they weren't quite right or didn't send the right message. Finally, at the 4th store, she found something that met her standards. This is perfect, she said, holding up a navy jacket that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Very appropriate. Appropriate. There's that word again. Not handsome, not stylish, not impressive. Appropriate. Like I'm a piece of furniture she needs to match the curtains. While she was busy planning the party of the century, I had my own preparations to make. See, Celia had already told me exactly what gift she wanted, a Hermes handbag she'd been subtly hinting about for months. Subtle like a freight train, but whatever. She'd sent me links, pictures, even the exact model number. The Birkin bag in a taupe color, whatever the hell that means. $42,000. For a purse. I spent 3 paychecks on that bag. Had to dip into my emergency fund, the money I'd been secretly saving for. Well, for emergencies. The sales associate at the Hermes store looked at me like I was trying to pay with Monopoly money when I handed over my credit card. But it went through, and I walked out of there with a little orange box that cost more than most people's cars. She's going to love it, the saleswoman said with that practiced smile they reserve for customers who just made questionable financial decisions. Yeah, she probably would love it. For about 5 minutes, until she moved on to the next thing she needed. But I had my reasons for buying it. Reasons that went way beyond making my wife happy on her birthday. The week before the party, the invitations went out. Fancy cardstock with gold lettering, the whole 9 yards. Warren and Lorraine Montgomery request the pleasure of your company. My name was nowhere on those invitations. Not even a mention that this was actually a joint celebration from both families. Just the Montgomerys, throwing a party for their daughter, with her husband as some unnamed +1. But I didn't come to this party empty-handed, and I'm not just talking about the overpriced purse sitting in my closet. I'd been making my own preparations, setting up my own little surprises for the big night. Because if they wanted to make this birthday memorable, well, I was going to make sure they got exactly what they asked for. The night before the party, I tried one last time. Celia, I said, are you sure about all this? I mean, do we really need such a big production? She looked at me like I'd just suggested canceling Christmas. Marcus, this is important to me. To my family. I need you to understand that. I understand, I said. And I did. I understood perfectly. Tomorrow night, 300 of the right kind of people would gather on that rooftop terrace to celebrate my wife's birthday. They'd eat expensive food, drink top-shelf liquor, and toast to Celia's bright future with someone who isn't me. But they had no idea what kind of show they were really in for. The night of the party, I stood in front of our bedroom mirror adjusting that damn navy tie for the 10th time. The suit fit perfectly. Celia had made sure of that, but I felt like I was wearing a costume. Which, I guess, was exactly the point. Tonight, I was playing the role of the acceptable husband, dressed appropriately so nobody would mistake me for the help. You ready? Celia called from the bathroom, where she'd been getting ready for the past 2 hours. When she finally emerged, I had to admit she looked stunning. The gold dress caught the light just right. Her hair was pulled back in some fancy updo that probably cost more than most people's rent, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. You look beautiful, I said, and I meant it. Whatever else was wrong between us, she was still gorgeous. She barely glanced at me. Thanks. You look fine. Fine. Not good. Not handsome. Not even decent. Fine. Like I'd successfully managed not to embarrass her, which was apparently the highest compliment I could hope for. The ride to Manhattan was quiet. Celia spent the whole time checking her phone, responding to messages from people who were already at the party. I stared out the window at the city lights, that familiar knot in my stomach getting tighter with every mile. The sky terrace was everything Warren had promised and more. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space, giving a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline. The decor screamed money. White orchids everywhere, crystal chandeliers, tables set with china that probably cost more per plate than I made in a day. And the people. Jesus, the people. I recognized faces from the society pages, local politicians, business leaders. This wasn't just a birthday party. It was a networking event disguised as a celebration. Marcus, Warren's voice boomed across the room as we walked in. He was already 3 drinks deep, his face flushed with alcohol and the joy of showing off. There's my son-in-law. Come meet some people. For the next hour, I played my part perfectly. Smiled and nodded through introductions I'd forget by morning. Made small talk about the weather and the view. Laughed at jokes that weren't funny. And the whole time, I could feel the curious stares, hear the whispered conversations behind me. That's Celia's husband. What does he do again? Something with paperwork, I think. Sweet girl, she could do so much better. By 9 o'clock, the champagne was flowing freely and the crowd was properly warmed up. That's when Warren clinked his glass and called for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice carrying easily across the terrace. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate our beautiful daughter's 30th birthday. Celia, sweetheart, come up here. Celia practically glowed as she made her way to the front of the room. The crowd applauded, and someone whistled appreciatively. She was in her element, surrounded by all the right people, being celebrated exactly the way she'd always dreamed. Thank you all so much for being here. she said into the microphone Warren handed her. This is honestly more than I could have ever hoped for. Having all of you here, all the people who matter most to me. I noticed she didn't look in my direction when she said that. But before we get too sentimental, she continued with a laugh, I thought we could have a little fun. I put together a slideshow of some memories over the years. Mom, could you get the lights? The room dimmed, and a projector screen lowered from the ceiling. I found myself pushed to the back of the crowd as everyone gathered closer to watch, which was fine by me. I'd seen enough of Celia's childhood photos to last a lifetime. The slideshow started innocently enough. Baby pictures that got the appropriate ahs from the crowd. Elementary school photos where she looked adorable in pigtails and missing teeth. Middle school awkwardness that everyone could relate to. High school glamour shots where you could already see the woman she'd become. Then came college. Sorority parties, spring break trips, graduation day with Warren and Lorraine beaming proudly. Study abroad in Italy where she looked tan and carefree, posing in front of ancient ruins and quaint cafes. Her first job at the marketing firm, professional headshots that screamed success and ambition. The crowd was eating it up, calling out memories and inside jokes. Celia was glowing, soaking up every moment of attention. This was her night, her celebration, her chance to show everyone exactly who she was and what she'd accomplished. And now, she said, her voice taking on a playful tone that made my blood run cold. Let's talk about my current situation. That's when my photo appeared on the screen. A terrible candid shot she must have taken when I wasn't looking, where I looked tired and defeated. And underneath it, in giant block letters that everyone in the room could read clearly. Impotent. Failure. High school dropout. Low income. Now single. The laughter started immediately. Not polite chuckles or nervous giggles, but real, genuine laughter. People were pointing at the screen, at me, doubling over like this was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. I heard someone in the back yell, "Oh my God," and burst into fresh peals of laughter. I stood there, frozen in place, watching 300 people laugh at the most intimate, devastating lies about my life projected on a giant screen for everyone to see. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the laughter, but it wasn't shame I was feeling. It was clarity. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for without even knowing it. 5 years of small humiliations had led to this one perfect, crystallizing instant where everything became absolutely clear. Celia was still at the microphone, grinning at her audience like a stand-up comedian who'd just delivered the perfect punchline. "Don't laugh too much," she said. "He might cry." More laughter. Someone near me was wiping tears from their eyes. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady as I opened the app I'd prepared for exactly this moment. "Begin," I said quietly, too quietly for anyone to hear over the ongoing laughter. But they were about to hear a lot more from me. The laughter wasn't stopping. If anything, it was getting louder, more vicious. I watched faces I'd shaken hands with an hour earlier contort with amusement at my expense. These people, lawyers, politicians, business owners, the so-called pillars of society, were acting like teenagers who'd just seen someone slip and fall in the hallway. Margaret Chun, a city councilwoman I'd met during cocktail hour, was literally slapping her knee while pointing at the screen. "Oh honey," she called out to her husband, "look at this poor thing." Her husband, some real estate mogul whose name I couldn't remember, was wiping tears from his eyes. "Jesus Christ, Celia," laughed David Morrison, one of Warren's golf buddies. "Where'd you find this guy, a homeless shelter?" That got another round of howls from the crowd. Even people I'd never seen before in my life were joining in, feeding off the energy like sharks smelling blood in the water. Social media phones were coming out now. I could see the camera flashes, people recording videos of the screen, of me standing there taking it all. Celia was eating it up. She stood at that microphone like she was hosting I know, she said, gesturing toward me with theatrical sympathy. I felt bad for him too, at first. But then I realized, someone has to take care of the strays, right? More laughter. Someone in the front row, I think it was one of her sorority sisters, shouted out, "Girl, you're a saint." The best part, Celia continued, really warming up now, is that he actually thinks this is a real marriage. Like, he puts on that little suit every morning and goes to his little job and comes home thinking he's a real husband. I looked around the room, taking in every face. The cruel delight in their expressions. The way they were looking at me like I was some kind of exotic animal in a zoo. These were supposed to be educated people, cultured people, the kind who donated to charity and went to opera galas and prided themselves on their sophistication. But put them in a pack, give them a target, and they turned into something else entirely. Warren was standing near the bar, scotch in hand, chuckling along with his buddies. Poor bastard, I heard him say to the man next to him. Probably doesn't even realize he's the help. Lorraine hadn't moved from her table, but she was smiling that cold smile of hers, sipping her wine like she was watching her favorite movie. Every so often she'd lean over to whisper something to the woman beside her, and they'd both glance at me and laugh. "Marcus, sweetie," Celia called out from the microphone, like she was addressing a child who'd wandered into the room by mistake. "Come up here. Don't be shy." The crowd turned to look at me expectantly, hundreds of eyes waiting to see what the pathetic husband would do next. Would I cry? Would I run? Would I just stand there and take it like the weakling they all thought I was? A few people started clapping, but it wasn't encouraging applause. It was the kind of slow, sarcastic clapping you'd give to someone who'd just failed spectacularly at something simple. "Speech. Speech," someone called out, and others picked up the chant. I could feel the weight of every gaze in the room. All these successful, powerful people who'd come here tonight expecting entertainment, and boy, were they getting it. The loser husband, publicly humiliated by his beautiful wife, too pathetic to fight back, too broken to do anything but stand there and take it. My phone felt warm in my hand. 3 taps on the screen, that's all it would take. 3 taps to change everything. But first, I wanted to really look at them. I wanted to memorize this moment, these faces, this feeling. Because once I pressed that button, none of us would ever be the same. There was Jennifer Walsh, the lifestyle blogger who'd spent 20 minutes telling me about her authentic brand and how important it was to live your truth. She was recording the whole thing on her phone, probably already composing the caption for her Instagram story. There was Robert Kane, the investment advisor who'd given me his card earlier and told me to call if you ever want to get serious about your future. He was doubled over with laughter, his expensive toupee slightly askew. There was Dr. Patricia Vance, the therapist who'd written 3 books about emotional wellness and healthy relationships. She was applauding along with everyone else, as if publicly destroying someone's dignity was just good entertainment. These were Celia's people, her tribe, her chosen family. And this cruelty disguised as humor, this pack mentality, this complete lack of basic human decency. This was who she really was when she thought nobody was watching. Except somebody was watching. Lots of somebodies, actually. I looked back at Celia, still basking in the glow of the spotlight, still playing to her audience like the star of her own show. She caught my eye and winked, actually winked, like we were sharing some private joke instead of her systematically destroying what was left of my reputation in front of 300 strangers. That's when I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I didn't just marry the wrong person. I married someone who genuinely enjoyed causing pain. Someone who got off on having power over others. Someone who saw kindness as weakness and cruelty as entertainment. And that's when I smiled. Not the fake, polite smile I'd been wearing for 5 years, but a real one. Because these people had no idea what they'd just done. They thought they were watching a lamb being led to slaughter. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I lifted my phone, opened the app, and said the word that would change everything. Begin. The first thing that happened was the screen went black. Just for a second, like someone had unplugged something. The laughter died down a bit as people looked around, wondering if there was a technical glitch. Celia tapped the microphone a couple times, that annoyed expression crossing her face that I knew so well. The one she got when things didn't go exactly according to her plan. "Is someone working on this?" she called out, shading her eyes against the spotlights as she looked toward the back of the room where the AV tech was supposed to be stationed. Then the screen flickered back to life. But instead of Celia's humiliating slideshow, there were new words scrolling across in bold white text. Live broadcast, the truth behind the smile. And underneath that, a number that made my heart race with satisfaction. 1,042,312 viewers and counting. The gasps started rippling through the crowd like a wave. People were pulling out their phones, frantically trying to figure out what was happening. I could hear confused murmurs, someone saying, "What the hell is this?" And another voice asking, is this some kind of joke? But it wasn't a joke. This was 5 years of planning finally coming together. The comments section appeared at the bottom of the screen, messages from my YouTube livestream audience scrolling by faster than anyone could read them. But I caught a few. Holy shit, is this really happening, Liv? Marcus, we're with you, brother. These people are about to get wrecked. 1 million viewers in the first minute. This is insane. Celia's face had gone from confused to panicked. She was squinting at the screen, trying to process what she was seeing. The crowd was getting restless now, that pack mentality shifting from cruel amusement to nervous uncertainty. That's when my face appeared on the giant screen behind her. Not the tired, defeated photo she'd used to humiliate me, but a professional headshot from my real work. Clean-shaven, confident, wearing a suit that actually fit properly. And above my image, the title that nobody in this room knew about. Marcus Grant, Real Talk Healing. Licensed Trauma Recovery Coach. Founder, Silent No More Foundation. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive space. 300 people, all staring at the screen like they couldn't quite process what they were seeing. What is this? Celia whispered into the microphone, her voice barely audible. She spun around to look at the screen, then back at me, then at the screen again. Marcus, what? Let me explain, I said, and my voice carried perfectly across the room without any microphone at all. 5 years of public speaking experience will do that for you. You see, everyone here tonight thinks they know who Marcus Grant is. The quiet husband. The pushover. The guy who just takes whatever you dish out and says thank you. I started walking toward the front of the room, and the crowd parted in front of me like I was carrying something contagious. People were backing away, drinks forgotten, all eyes fixed on me as if I'd suddenly grown a second head. But here's what you don't know. I continued, my voice steady and calm. Marcus Grant isn't just some office drone who lucked into marrying above his station. Marcus Grant is the face behind Real Talk Healing, a YouTube channel with 2.3 million subscribers. People who've been watching my content for 3 years know me as the guy who helps men and women recognize emotional abuse and find their way out of toxic relationships. The comments on the screen were going crazy now. Yes, Marcus, tell them. We've been waiting for this moment. Your story helped me leave my abusive ex. This is the best revenge ever. Celia's mouth was hanging open. She looked like someone had just told her that gravity had been canceled. That's not possible, she stammered. You work at an accounting firm. You make $35,000 a year. You're nobody. I finished for her. Yeah, that's what you thought. That's what I needed you to think. See, when you're documenting abuse for legal purposes, it helps if the abuser feels completely safe. If they think there's no way their victim could ever hurt them back. Warren was pushing through the crowd now, his face red with more than just alcohol. This is ridiculous, he shouted. Security, get this man out of here. But the security guards, all 3 of them, were standing perfectly still, looking more interested in what was happening than in stopping it. That's because I'd had a conversation with their supervisor earlier this week. Amazing what a decent tip and a simple request can accomplish. The beautiful thing about running a channel focused on emotional abuse, I said, addressing the crowd like I was giving a TED Talk, is that you develop a really good eye for recognizing the patterns. The gaslighting, the public humiliation, the systematic destruction of someone's self-worth. More comments were flooding the screen. This is therapeutic to watch. Celia is about to get exposed. Marcus has been playing 4D chess this whole time. I looked directly at Celia, who was still standing frozen at the microphone. You thought you married a loser, I said. Someone so pathetic and broken that you could treat him however you wanted with 0 consequences. But what you actually married was someone who spent 5 years carefully documenting every cruel thing you and your family said and did. The crowd was dead silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, standing perfectly still with their trays as they watched this unfold. So let me introduce myself properly, I said, spreading my arms wide to address the entire room. My name is Marcus Grant. I hold a master's degree in psychology from Columbia University. I'm a licensed trauma recovery specialist. I've written 2 best-selling books about recognizing and escaping emotional abuse. My nonprofit foundation has helped over 10,000 people leave toxic relationships. And my annual income from speaking engagements, book sales, and online coaching. I paused, letting the tension build. just shy of $500,000. The screen behind me erupted with celebration emojis and fire symbols as my audience realized what was happening. And in that moment, looking at 300 shocked faces staring back at me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 5 years. Power. The power I felt in that moment was intoxicating, but I wasn't done. Not even close. You see, when you spend 5 years being treated like you're invisible, you pick up a lot of conversations that people think you can't hear. And when you're a trauma recovery specialist who understands the importance of documentation, you make sure those conversations are preserved. Now, I said, pulling my phone out again, I know what some of you are thinking. Maybe this is all just talk. Maybe I'm making this up to save face after being humiliated. So let me share some evidence with you. I tapped my screen, and the audio player interface appeared on the big screen behind me. The timestamp showed a date from 8 months ago. The location data showed our apartment in Brooklyn. This first recording, I announced to the room, was captured during one of Celia's regular phone calls with her mother. I was in the kitchen making dinner, as usual, and they were in the living room having what they thought was a private conversation. I hit play. Celia's voice filled the terrace, crystal clear through the premium sound system Warren had paid extra for. The irony wasn't lost on me. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, Mom. He's just so pathetic. Like, he actually thinks this is a real marriage. Lorraine's laugh was unmistakable, that cold, brittle sound I'd heard 1,000 times. Oh, sweetheart, you're doing the right thing. Think of it as community service. Someone has to take care of the strays. But seriously, Celia continued, he's just a stepping stone until I find someone better. Someone who actually matters. I mean, can you imagine introducing him to anyone important? Hi, meet Marcus. He files paperwork for a living. The crowd was dead silent now. All those faces that had been laughing 5 minutes ago were frozen, watching Celia like they'd never seen her before. Some people were actually backing away from her, like being associated with this conversation might somehow contaminate them. The worst part, Celia's voice continued from the speakers, is that he's actually grateful. Like, he thanks me for letting him take me to dinner. He thanks me for letting him buy me things. It's honestly disgusting how desperate he is. Well, Lorraine's voice replied, just make sure you don't get pregnant with him. You'd be stuck with that bloodline forever. Can you imagine? Both women laughed on the recording, and the sound echoed through the silent terrace like a gunshot. I looked directly at Celia, who had gone completely white. Her hands were shaking as she gripped the microphone stand. Remember that conversation? I asked her. You were planning our anniversary dinner at the time. I spent 2 weeks saving up to take you to that steakhouse you wanted to try. You thanked me afterward, told me what a wonderful husband I was. The comments on the screen were brutal. Celia is trash. How could anyone be this cruel? This woman is a sociopath. Marcus deserves so much better. But I wasn't finished. I loaded up the second audio file. This one, I said, is from a conversation between Warren and his golf buddies 3 months ago. They were in our living room having drinks while I was supposedly running errands for them. Warren's voice boomed through the speakers, slurred with expensive scotch. The boy's useful, I'll give him that. Picks up dry cleaning, handles all the boring husband duties, never complains about anything. Hell, he even pays for half the household expenses on his little salary. Male laughter in the background. But Jesus Christ, Warren continued. Watching him try to fit in with real men is like watching a chihuahua try to run with wolves. Celia knows she's slumming it. We all know she's slumming it. But hey, better to have a placeholder than be alone, right? Another voice, I recognized it as Robert Kane, the investment advisor, chimed in. How long you think she'll keep him around? Until something better comes along, Warren replied. Could be next month, could be next year. Depends on who she meets. But mark my words, the minute she finds a real man with real money and real prospects, little Marcus is getting his walking papers. More laughter, and then Warren's voice again. Let the boy keep thinking he matters. It's useful. He does all the work while she focuses on finding his replacement. I watched Warren's face as his own words played back to him. The confident, jovial expression had melted away, replaced by something between panic and rage. He was looking around the room like a trapped animal, probably trying to figure out how to spin this, how to control the narrative. But there was no controlling this. Not anymore. Useful. I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. That's what I was to you people. Not a son-in-law, not a family member, Not even a human being really. Just something useful. A tool you could use and discard when you found something better. The third audio file was already loaded. This one was going to hurt. And this last one, I said, my voice getting harder. This is the phone call that convinced me it was time to stop being useful. Celia's voice filled the space again, but this time she was talking to someone else. Someone whose voice would be very familiar to Warren and Lorraine. Marco, baby, I miss you so much. The gasp that went through the crowd was audible. Marco Restrepo, Warren's business partner's son. The golden boy who'd been circling Celia like a shark for the past year. I know, Marco's voice replied. But you said you were handling the Marcus situation. I am. God, I can't wait to be done with this charade. The birthday party is going to be perfect. I'm going to humiliate him so badly in front of everyone that leaving him will look like mercy. People will actually feel sorry for me for having to put up with such a loser for so long. And then we can finally be together? The minute the divorce papers are signed. I already talked to Daddy's lawyer. We can have Marcus cleaned out and gone within a month. He'll probably thank me for putting him out of his misery. They both laughed, and the sound was like nails on a chalkboard. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked around the room, taking in every shocked face, every expression of disgust and disbelief. These people had come here tonight expecting to watch me get destroyed. Instead, they were watching the destruction of everything they thought they knew about the woman they'd been celebrating. The audio recordings had done their work. I could see it in their faces, the slow dawning realization that they'd been played, that the person they'd been laughing at was actually the one holding all the cards. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. See, the thing about being underestimated, I said, walking closer to the crowd, is that it gives you incredible freedom to work. While you all thought I was just some pathetic office clerk, I was actually building something you never saw coming. I gestured to the screen behind me, where my professional credentials were still displayed. Let me tell you what Marcus Grant has really been doing for the past 5 years while you all assumed he was filing paperwork and feeling grateful for scraps. The comments section was exploding with support messages, but I could also see that the viewer count had climbed to over 1.8 million people. This wasn't just going viral. This was becoming a cultural moment. First, I said, pointing to the screen, let's talk about education. You heard Warren earlier talking about his son-in-law, the high school dropout. Interesting story there. See, I did drop out of high school when I was 16 to take care of my dying mother. Worked 3 jobs to pay for her medical treatment until she passed when I was 18. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. But here's what Warren's detective skills missed. I got my GED, then my bachelor's degree in psychology from Brooklyn College, graduating summa cum laude. Then my master's degree from Columbia. You know, that little Ivy League school up in Manhattan. Graduated with a 3.9 GPA while working full-time to pay for it. I could see Celia's face in my peripheral vision. She looked like someone had just told her the laws of physics had been suspended. But wait, there's more. I continued, my voice dripping with the sarcasm I'd held back for 5 years. While I was playing the role of the grateful husband, I was also completing my certification as AT. The screen behind me switched to show my actual credentials. Diplomas, certificates, professional licenses, all bearing the name Marcus Daniel Grant. All legitimate, all impressive as hell. And that little office job? The one where I supposedly push papers around for 35 grand a year. I laughed, and the sound carried across the silent terrace. That's my day job. My cover story. My way of keeping a low profile while I built something real. I clicked to the next slide, showing screenshots of my YouTube channel analytics. The numbers were staggering. Millions of views, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, comments from people all over the world thanking me for helping them escape abusive relationships. Real Talk Healing isn't just a YouTube channel, I explained. It's a movement. Over 2 million subscribers who tune in every week to hear me talk about recognizing emotional abuse, building self-worth, and finding the strength to leave toxic relationships. Funny thing is, I've been using my own marriage as a case study for the past 3 years. You've all been my research subjects. Someone in the crowd, I think it was Margaret Chun, the city councilwoman, actually gasped out loud. You mean, all this time? All this time, I've been documenting every cruel comment, every dismissive look, every moment of psychological manipulation. Not just for legal purposes, though that was part of it. But for content, do you have any idea how valuable real-time documentation of emotional abuse is to researchers and therapists? The comments on screen were incredible. Marcus just broke the internet. This man is a genius. Celia played herself so hard. I've been watching his channel for years. This is amazing. My book, I continued, Invisible Wounds, Recognizing Emotional Abuse in Plain Sight, hit the New York Times bestseller list 18 months ago. It's been translated into 12 languages. The follow-up, Breaking the Silence. A Survivor's Guide to Reclaiming Your Voice, came out 6 months ago and debuted at number 3. I looked directly at Warren, whose face had gone from red to a sickly pale color. That advance alone was more than your daughter's entire annual salary, Warren. But please, tell me more about how I don't matter. The screen switched again, showing the Silent No More Foundation's homepage. Photos of support groups, testimonials from survivors, statistics about the people we'd helped. The nonprofit I founded has chapters in 37 states now, I said. We've helped over 10,000 people leave abusive relationships. We provide legal aid, counseling services, temporary housing assistance, and job placement help, all funded by speaking fees that range from $25,000 to $50,000 per event. I could see people in the crowd pulling out their phones, frantically Googling my name, probably trying to verify what I was saying. Good luck with that. I'd been very careful to keep my public persona separate from my married life. Until tonight. And those speaking engagements? I smiled, really enjoying this part. Last month alone, I spoke at Harvard Medical School, the American Psychological Association's annual conference, and a corporate training event for Google. This month, I'm keynoting the International Conference on Domestic Violence Prevention in Geneva. Celia finally found her voice. This is impossible, she whispered into the microphone. You can't. I would have known. Would you? I asked. When exactly would you have found out, Celia? During all those deep, meaningful conversations we had about my hopes and dreams? Oh wait, we never had those, because you never asked. You never cared enough to ask. I gestured around the room. None of you did. You all just assumed that quiet Marcus with his little office job was exactly what he appeared to be. It never occurred to any of you that maybe, just maybe, someone who stays calm under pressure and observes everything might actually be intelligent. The viewer count was approaching 2 million now. This was bigger than anything I'd ever streamed before. So let me introduce some people who actually know who I am, I said, pointing to various spots around the room. Felix Martinez, my technical director, is sitting at table 12. He's the one who set up tonight's broadcast equipment. Wave hello, Felix. A young man in a server's uniform raised his hand and grinned. The crowd turned to stare at him like he was an alien. Leah Thompson, my business manager and the person who actually runs my foundation day-to-day, is over by the bar. She's been serving drinks all night and listening to you people trash talk her boss. A woman in catering attire stepped forward and gave a little mock curtsy. Several people near the bar actually backed away from her. And Jordan Walsh. Yeah, Jennifer, that's your ex-husband, is my attorney. He's been documenting everything that happened here tonight for the inevitable legal proceedings. A man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped out from behind one of the pillars, holding a tablet and stylus. Jennifer Walsh, the lifestyle blogger, looked like she was going to faint. See, the thing about building a platform that helps abuse survivors, I said, is that you learn the importance of having a really, really good support team. I looked back at Celia, who was still frozen at the microphone like a deer in headlights. So tell me, sweetheart, I said, my voice carrying that cold edge I'd never let her hear before. How does it feel to find out you've been married to someone who actually matters? Celia's face had gone through about 15 different emotions in the past 10 minutes, but now she was settling on desperate defiance. She grabbed the microphone with both hands like it was a life preserver, her knuckles white against the black metal. This is all fake, she shouted, her voice cracking with hysteria. He's lying. He's making all of this up because he can't handle being exposed for what he really is. The crowd wasn't buying it anymore. I could see people exchanging glances, pulling up my website on their phones, probably finding my professional profiles that had been hidden in plain sight for years. The spell was broken, and they were starting to see her the way I'd seen her all along. Felix, I called out calmly. Would you mind playing that last recording? The one from 2 days ago. Felix nodded from his position at table 12, and I heard him tap something on his phone. The screen behind Celia lit up with another audio interface, this one showing a timestamp from just 48 hours earlier. "This is a phone conversation between my wife and Marco Restrepo," I announced to the room. "Recorded 2 nights ago while I was supposedly working late at the office." Celia's eyes went wide with panic. "No, don't. Marcus, please." But it was too late. Her voice filled the terrace again, sultry and intimate in a way she'd never spoken to me. "Marco, baby, I can't wait for this to be over. The birthday party is going to be perfect. I'm going to humiliate him so completely that everyone will understand why I had to leave him." Marco's voice was smooth, confident. "Are you sure about this plan? Seems kind of cruel, even for you." Celia laughed, that genuine laugh I rarely heard anymore. "Trust me, it'll be hilarious. He'll probably start crying in front of everyone. And then I can play the long-suffering wife who finally reached her breaking point. People will actually feel sorry for me for having to put up with such a pathetic husband for so long. And after the party, I'll file for divorce on Monday. Daddy's lawyers already have the papers ready. Mental cruelty, irreconcilable differences, the whole package. We'll make sure he doesn't get a penny, and then you and I can finally stop sneaking around. What if he fights it? With what? He's got no money for a decent lawyer, no connections, no power. He'll sign whatever we put in front of him and disappear back to whatever hole he crawled out of. I give it 3 months before he's living in some studio apartment in Queens, crying into his ramen noodles." Both of them burst into laughter on the recording, and the sound echoed through the now silent terrace like a slap. I clicked stop and looked around the room. The transformation was complete. These people who'd been laughing at me 20 minutes ago were now looking at Celia like she was something toxic they'd accidentally stepped in. Warren was standing frozen by the bar, his scotch forgotten in his hand. Lorraine had actually covered her face with her napkin. Even Marco himself, who I could see trying to hide behind a pillar near the back, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "So there you have it," I said, addressing the crowd like a prosecutor giving closing arguments. "The real Celia Montgomery Grant. Not the victim of a disappointing marriage, but the architect of 5 years of psychological torture. The woman who planned this entire evening as the grand finale of her campaign to destroy someone she thought was too weak to fight back." I pulled one more item from my jacket pocket, a manila envelope that had been delivered to my office that morning. "Which brings me to this," I said, holding up the envelope. "Divorce papers, filed this morning. Signed, sealed, and served, along with a restraining order and a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress." Celia's legs actually gave out. She grabbed the microphone stand to keep from falling, her mouth moving but no sound coming out. "Oh, and Celia?" I said, my voice carrying that cold satisfaction I'd been holding back for years. "The prenup you made me sign? The one your daddy's lawyers thought was so clever? Turns out it's null and void when one party commits adultery and emotional abuse. My lawyers, the really expensive ones, made sure of that." The cracks in her perfect facade were spreading like a spider web across glass. And I was just getting started. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Within seconds of that final recording ending, I watched Celia's carefully constructed world start collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. James Carter, the venture capitalist who'd been funding Celia's marketing startup, was the first to move. He'd been standing near the front, checking his phone constantly throughout my little presentation. Now he was walking straight toward the exit, his face stone cold. "James, wait." Celia called out desperately, finally finding her voice. "Let me explain." He didn't even turn around. "My office will be in touch about dissolving our partnership," he said without breaking stride. "Effective immediately." That was $300,000 in startup funding walking out the door, and everyone in the room knew it. The business connections, the professional network she'd spent years building, all of it was evaporating in real time. Maya Rodriguez, Celia's cousin who'd flown in from Chicago for the party, pushed through the crowd with tears streaming down her face. She walked straight up to where I was standing and grabbed my hands. "Marcus, I am so sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I had no idea. If I had known what they were doing to you." She turned to glare at Celia. "How could you? How could you be so cruel to someone who loved you?" Maya wasn't alone. I watched as person after person approached me. People who'd been laughing at that slideshow 15 minutes ago were now apologizing, offering support, asking if there was anything they could do. The social dynamics in the room had completely flipped. Meanwhile, two journalists I'd tipped off earlier in the week were making their way toward Warren and Lorraine. Sarah Chun from the New York Post and Marcus Williams from the Daily News, both specialists in covering high society scandals. I'd reached out to them yesterday, promising them a story they wouldn't want to miss. "Mr. Montgomery," Sarah called out, her recorder already running. "Care to comment on the allegations of emotional abuse we just heard? How does it feel to discover your investment banking clients might be interested in your family's treatment of vulnerable people?" Warren's face went from pale to purple. "No comment. This is a private family matter. Is it true you encouraged your daughter to commit adultery as part of a plan to defraud her husband in divorce proceedings?" Marcus Williams pressed, his photographer already snapping shots. Lorraine tried to make a run for it, but she was cornered by another group of people, former friends who were suddenly very interested in discussing her charity work. Turns out, when you're exposed as someone who enjoys psychological cruelty, people start wondering what else you might be capable of. The livestream viewer count had hit 2.8 million. My phone was buzzing non-stop with notifications, interview requests, speaking offers, messages from other abuse survivors sharing their own stories. This wasn't just going viral. It was becoming a movement. "Marcus." I turned to find Dr. Patricia Vance, the therapist who'd been laughing along with everyone else earlier. She looked sick to her stomach. "I need to apologize," she said quietly. "I've spent my entire career helping people recover from exactly this kind of abuse, and I sat there and laughed while it was happening right in front of me. I'm ashamed of myself." "You should be," I said simply. "But at least you're owning it now." Celia was still at the microphone, looking around desperately as her world crumbled. She tried to approach me several times, but Jordan, my attorney, stepped between us each time. "Mrs. Grant," he said formally, "I'm advising my client not to speak with you without legal representation present. Here's your copy of the restraining order." She stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "This isn't real." But it was real. 5 years of planning, 5 years of documentation, 5 years of building the platform and resources I'd need to fight back. It was all paying off in ways I'd never imagined. By midnight, the video had hit 4.3 million views. My email inbox was flooded with messages from survivors, supporters, journalists, and even a few celebrities who wanted to amplify the story. The hashtag #SilentNoMore was trending on 3 different social media platforms. Celia tried calling me 17 times that night. I let them all go to voicemail, then had Jordan save the recordings as evidence of harassment. The joke was over, and I was the one laughing now. 1 year later, I was sitting on a panel at the Palmer House Hilton in Chicago, looking out at an audience of 800 mental health professionals, survivors, and advocates. The banner behind me read, "Breaking the Silence, a national conference on emotional abuse recovery," and my name was listed right alongside some of the most respected researchers in the field. It's funny how much your perspective can change in 12 months. A year ago, I was Marcus Grant, the invisible husband who filed paperwork and kept his mouth shut. Today, I was Marcus Grant, the keynote speaker who'd turned his personal hell into a platform that was changing lives across the country. The topic of today's panel, I said into the microphone, my voice carrying easily across the packed ballroom, is healing in silence. When quiet strength becomes powerful voice. And I want to start by telling you something that might surprise you. I looked out at the sea of faces, therapists, social workers, survivors, advocates, people who'd driven hundreds of miles to be here. A year ago tonight, I was standing in front of 300 people who thought I was a joke. People who laughed while my wife publicly humiliated me, who saw my pain as entertainment. And you know what? In that moment, I realized something that changed everything. The room was completely silent, hanging on every word. I realized that being underestimated isn't always a weakness. Sometimes, it's the greatest gift you can get. Because while they were laughing at me, I was learning. While they were dismissing me, I was building. While they thought I was broken, I was becoming stronger than any of them could imagine. Scattered applause broke out, but I held up my hand. I wasn't done. See, that night, which most of you probably saw on YouTube, since it's been viewed over 47 million times now. that wasn't really about revenge. It was about reclaiming my voice. It was about showing the world that quiet people aren't weak people, that invisible doesn't mean powerless, and that sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one who sees everything most clearly. I gestured to my left, where Leah Thompson was sitting in her role as the executive director of the Silent No More Foundation. She'd quit her old job 6 months ago to work with me full-time, and together we built something neither of us could have imagined. Leah, tell them about the numbers. She leaned forward to her microphone, grinning. In the past year, we've opened chapters in all 50 states. We've helped over 50,000 people leave abusive relationships. Our hotline takes more than 2,000 calls a week. And Marcus's books, both the original and the follow-up, have been translated into 23 languages and have sold over 2 million copies worldwide. The applause was louder this time, but I could see people in the audience wiping their eyes. These weren't just statistics to them. These were lives changed, people saved, voices finally heard. But here's what I'm most proud of, I continued, pulling up a slide on the screen behind me. It showed a photo from our most recent support group meeting. Dozens of people, all survivors of emotional abuse, all learning to rebuild their lives and reclaim their power. Every week, we get messages from people who watched that video and recognized themselves in my story. People who realized they weren't crazy, they weren't overreacting, they weren't alone. And they found the courage to say the word that changed my life, that started this whole journey. I paused, looking out at all those faces, thinking about how far I'd come from that night on the terrace when everything seemed hopeless. Begin, I said simply. That's all it takes. One word, one decision, one moment when you stop being silent and start being heard. Behind me, the giant screen displayed the same words I'd spoken softly into my phone that night, but now they meant something different. Not destruction, but creation. Not ending, but beginning. I used to be the joke, I said, my voice strong and clear. The punchline in someone else's story. The guy everyone felt sorry for, if they bothered to notice me at all. I stood up, spreading my arms to encompass the entire room. Now I'm the voice. The platform. The proof that no matter how small they try to make you feel, no matter how invisible they think you are, you have power. You have worth. And you have something they can never take away from you. I smiled, feeling that same clarity I'd felt a year ago, but this time it was warm instead of cold, healing instead of harsh. You have your story, and when you're ready, when you find the courage to stop being silent, that story can change everything. The standing ovation went on for 5 minutes. But more importantly, I could see it in their eyes, that spark of recognition, that moment of understanding. The silent were finding their voices, and I wasn't alone anymore.